Well, I wanted to go in the agency business, New York, and there was only one agency I wanted to work for, and that was Young and Rubicam. I was tremendously impressed by them, and by Raymond Rubicam in particular. I wanted to work there, but I didn't think I could ever get a job there. I had no qualifications, no credentials. I didn't even dare ask. So the only alternative was to start my own, which is what I did.
What was your first job when you came to the United States?
I had terribly good luck. I had to get a job in a hurry because I was staying at the St. Regis Hotel and I only had $10 left. And I was offered a job by George Gallup, Ted Gallup. He hired me to go to Princeton and do some research for the motion picture industry. The greatest break I ever had in my life. If you ever go to a country that you don't know anything about to work, start by getting a job in the local Gallup poll. You'll learn a lot from it about the people who live in the country, the natives, and what makes them tick and what their habits are and what they think. That happened to me. I got working for Gallup at Princeton.
What did you learn from Gallup that was most helpful, David?
Oh, I learned so much from Gallup. I suppose the most I've learned the research business, but in particular, he taught me the concept of analyzing the factors which make for success in advertising and the factors which make for failure. He was then research director of Young and Rubicam before he started Gallup and Robinson. And that's been invaluable to me over the years.
Do you think your research background conditions your creative?
And how, yeah. And how. See, when we started Ogilvy and Mather, we were nothing. We were about that big. Now we've got to be distinguished for something. The only thing I knew about was research. I said we'll specialize in creative research, which is what we did at the beginning. And ever since then, the research input into our creative operations has been tremendous. It's too much nowadays, but it's a fault on the right side.
Is that right? Well, tell me, how and why did you start your own agency?
How and why did I start my own agency? Well, I wanted to go in the agency business, New York, and there was only one agency I wanted to work for, and that was Young and Rubicam. I was tremendously impressed by them, and by Raymond Rubicam in particular. I wanted to work there, but I didn't think I could ever get a job there. I had no qualifications, no credentials. I didn't even dare ask. So the only alternative was to start my own, which is what I did. But my admiration for Young and Rubicam still prevails undimmed to this day, 100 years later.
When did you feel that Ogilvy and Mather was really beginning to be a successful agency?
Oh, about a month ago. I saw the billings figures and advertising agents saw that Ogilvy and Mather had gone up to 5th place. So it dawned on me that it was a successful agency. It's 25 years after we started, and I think that it takes about 25 years to build a good, successful, stable agency. You can't do it overnight. But there it is now, and I feel like an old dog with a puppy. I don't recognize it as my son anymore. I feel curiously detached from it. It's grown beyond me, and it's now very successful.
Tell me.
For many years, you know, John, I was terrified. I lived in terror that it would blow away. We were going very well. We were very successful. I didn't realize at the time how successful we were, how strong we were. And I thought, every day it's going to blow away. Something's going to happen. We're going to lose a big account. We'll start a run on the bank. And occasionally we did lose a big account, but it never started a run on the bank. I was always terrified. Now I'm not any longer.
You built your top staff by recruiting from agencies. Do you still hire people from other agencies, or do you expect them to be homegrown?
Well, I haven't hired anybody for years, but we're promoting almost entirely from within now. We almost never go outside at high levels. I think it's a pity. I think that from time to time it's a good thing for an agency to refresh its bloodstream by bringing somebody in from another company, another area, another discipline, even another agency. It's almost all homegrown now, promotion from within. Of course, in the early days, we had no choice. You can't promote from within if there's nobody within.
What probably distinguished the agency most in its early years was its distinctive creative work. Can we look at some of it now? Beginning with the Guinness Guide to Oysters.
I was the research director in our agency, and I'd never done any creative work, and we had to do an ad for Guinness and oysters. And I was going home. I lived in Old Greenwich, Connecticut in those days, and I was on the train going home one night, and I suddenly had an idea for an ad, which was to be a guide to oysters. And I was so astounded that I would have an idea that I got out of the station, out of the train at the next stop, and called in the office and said, "You won't believe it, I've had an idea." And this was my first advertisement, the Guinness Guide to Oysters. It led to a series, Guinness Guide to Game Birds, to steak, to other things, to cheese. It was my first advertisement, and it appeared only in the New Yorker. Most of our ads in those days only appeared in the New Yorker. That was the first one. I think that was a good ad.
Now the Hathaway shirt, the man in the Hathaway shirt.
Yes. We were hired by the Hathaway Company in Waterville, Maine. The head of Hathaway came in to see me. He said, "We're 106 years old and we've never advertised. We're going to start advertising. Will you do it?" I was very crass in those days. I said, "How much? What are you going to spend?" He said, $30,000. Well, a tear fell from my eye. He said, "I tell you what, I know it's very small, but if you'll take the account, I'll make you 2 promises. I'll never change a word you write, and I'll never fire you." So we started advertising Hathaway shirts, and we did the account advertising for about 20 years, and never changed a word we wrote. And this is the first ad, the man in the eye patch. Here's where research came in handy. I'd read a book called Attention and Interest Factors in Advertising by Hal Rudolph, who'd been the research director in the wonderful Getchell agency. And he'd got a factor which he called story appeal in picture. And he showed that the more story appeal there was in a picture, in a photograph, the more people would look at your ad. So I wanted to do an ad for these Hathaway shirts. I wanted to find this magic ingredient of story appeal. So after dinner one night at home, I sat down, wrote 18 ideas for this Hathaway advertising for the story appeal element. The 18th was the eye patch, and that was the one we used. And that lasted for 19 years, that campaign. Because it's pretty good advertising apart from the eye patch. The copy is very good. It's all about the product. We don't mess around. And it follows all the things I think you should do. And, for example, the name of the brand name is in every headline. It's a good campaign. It also only ran in New Yorker, but it was really the Hathaway campaign which rescued Ogilvy and Mather from obscurity.
How about the Schweppes campaign? The man from Schweppes is here.
That came shortly afterwards. Schweppes decided to invade the United States market, and our client appeared, an Englishman who was going to manage the office in New York called Commander Whitehead, who'd left the Navy shortly before. And I met him, and we persuaded him to be the sort of personal embodiment of the image of Schweppes to appear in all the advertisements. And here is the first Schweppes advertisement. Commander Whitehead arriving in New York. The man from Schweppes is here. He told me afterwards, I said, "What was in that briefcase which looked as if it was full of the secret formula for Schweppes?" He said, "A pair of my bathing suit." That was what was in it. That campaign lasted for 19 years. A good idea is one test of a good idea is how long will it last, and that Whitehead campaign for Schweppes lasted for 19 years too.
Now Rolls-Royce. At 60 miles an hour, the loudest noise is the clock.
That's a good ad, isn't it? I didn't write that headline. It's a quotation from an article which had appeared about 20 years before in an English automobile magazine. That's a good ad. I didn't know anything about automobiles in those days, but when we were hired by Rolls-Royce, I spent 3 weeks reading up on Rolls-Royce and came across that observation. Good ad. All all facts, no adjectives, all specific. Sold a lot of cars. Leo Burnett admired that ad very much. And I think more than anything else, it led to us getting the Shell account.
Well, that's the next advertisement. Shell, one of the bulletin ads.
Yeah. Yeah, this is one of the first ads we did for Shell in newspapers. We were running about 5 of these a week. In those days, Shell was using all the media before we went to work for them. Newspapers, magazines, television, radio, outdoor. And they didn't think they ought to be using so many, and asked us if we should drop one of them. Well, we went and talked to all the people in Shell and said, if you had to drop all, or just one medium, which would you drop? They all gave the same answer. They said, we'd drop newspapers. Imagine their surprise when we recommended that they should use only newspapers. That's what they did for a year. We had 3 or 4 of these big ads a week. They worked, along with 2 other very important factors in our marketing mix. This Shell campaign arrested a decline in share of market which had been going on for some years. We were the first people, as far as I know, who ever actually advertised the gasoline. There'd been a lot of gasoline advertising before, but we talked about the product. And we told people what went in the product, all the ingredients in a gallon of gasoline, and of what they did for you. I'd always thought until then that gasoline was brought out of the earth by an oil well and put in your car. But it's more complicated than that. There's a lot in it. We explained all this. It really was a great precedent in the advertising business, in the oil business. Well, after we'd been advertising Shell gasoline in newspapers for a year, we started in television, and we did these mileage commercials. Here is one of them. It's a long commercial and a very expensive commercial. I'll show it to you.
These are the tracks of the Santa Fe, stretching west through Arizona. Indian country here, the land of the Navajo. Near at hand, the petrified forest, tree trunks 160 million years old, long since turned to stone. Up ahead, the fantastic rocks of Oak Creek Canyon. Now our tracks turn south, curving through the mountains, past the old ghost towns. Finally, the tracks unwind, 24 miles, straight as a rifle shot. Now the tracks are cleared, not for a train, but for an automobile. In a moment, engineers of the Shell Oil Company will send this car down these straight rails in an unusual demonstration of gasoline mileage. Top quality gasolines are blends of various ingredients. Each is there for a reason. We're about to demonstrate a mileage ingredient called platformate. First we try Super Shell, but with platformate left out. 1 gallon. We start and let her go. No hills and no traffic to affect mileage. And no driver. Let's see how far we get without platformate. Half hour later, out of fuel, coasting to a stop. Let's mark the spot, go back to the beginning, and try Super Shell with platformate. 1 gallon. Same Ford Galaxy, same speed. If platformate really works, we ought to go farther. Here's where we stopped before, but with platformate, we keep right on going, more than a mile farther. That's why we blend platformate into Super Shell. We do everything we can at Shell to make our sign stand for excellence in the products we bring you, in the service we give you, at Shell stations everywhere.
May we now look at Puerto Rico, the advertisement with the empty room and the cello?
That's a good ad, isn't it? Wonderful. It's another example of story appeal in the picture. The obvious thing would have been to show Pablo Casals sitting there playing the cello. But instead we show this empty room with the cello leaning against the chair. That's story appeal. Why is the room empty? People want to know. And they go over here and read the copy, and that's all about the product, the Casals Festival. When they've read the copy, they call their travel agent and buy a ticket. That Puerto Rico campaign of ours, which has been going on, off and on, for more than 20 years led directly to our getting hired by Sears Roebuck in Chicago. And here's one of our first Sears ads, how to buy mink at Sears. That's a good ad, using an essentially editorial format, one of a long series.
Now, how about Dove?
We started advertising Dove about 20 years ago, and that campaign didn't change much for 20 years. It's been a very successful product. It's got a good margin. We started off so much in the New Yorker with fancy campaigns like Hathaway and Rolls-Royce and Guinness. And I remember one day a delegation came to see us from Procter & Gamble in Cincinnati. They came into my office. They were scouting us. They were wondering if they should give us a brand. I'm very excited to get a visit from Procter & Gamble. I got all these New Yorker sophisticated ads pinned up on our bulletin board. And the Procter people kept on looking. I thought, oh my God, there goes the ball game. They'll never hire us. They'll think we're only good advertising to the carriage trade. I said, don't look at those ads. And the man from Procter, one of them, said a thing I liked very much. He said, we assume that if you're as good at solving that kind of problem as you are, you'd be good at solving other kinds of problems equally well. I thought they were going to hire us, but the following day we got hired by Lever Brothers in New York, so they got there first and we went to work for them. Of course, they had the great advantage that Lever Brothers is in New York and Cincinnati is a long way away. In those days, you went there by train, it took forever, so I didn't have to go to Cincinnati for the rest of my life, 2 or 3 times a week.
Can we see some commercials you've liked? Beginning with the Maxwell House percolator commercial.
I'm glad you'd suggest that. That's one of my favorites. Marvelous Maxwell House commercial. That ran on the air for years. Here it is.
Smells good ground coffee. That's Maxwell House coffee. Listen to the sound of the Maxwell House coffee pot at work. Pour a cup of this good-smelling coffee. It will taste as good as it smells because it's good ground Maxwell House. Maxwell House coffee is good to the last drop. Enjoy the rich, fresh taste of Maxwell House coffee. The ground coffee that tastes as good as it smells every time. Maxwell House.
You know, there isn't too much difference between various brands of coffee. The one which gets the biggest share of market is the one with the best image. And Maxwell House owes its place in the market, I think, really, to an advertising campaign that J. Walter Thompson did for them from 1918 on, for the next few years. It was in print. And they gave Maxwell House a unique image. And then they went over to Benton and Bowles, and they did a marvelous job on the image of Maxwell House. Then they were going to change again, and I remember my old friend Ralph Starr Butler, the old advertising director of General Foods, had retired, but he said to General Foods, there are only 2 agencies which can do this job for Maxwell House. One is Leo Burnett in Chicago, and the other is over in New York. And it came to us, and this one commercial was seen. About all we did for 4 or 5 years. It was all on the product, you notice. The product was the hero. I'm very keen on that. There's no extraneous stuff. It's all about coffee. When we first got the account, I went over with some of my friends, colleagues, to their factory in Hoboken. And you could smell the coffee being roasted as you came into Hoboken. And I said to someone in the car, doesn't coffee smell wonderful? If only it tasted as good as it smells. And we used that as our promise. Maxwell House tastes as good as it smells. It's an interesting commercial because it was made by a committee. And I always say committees can't create. They did. So I had that thing, taste as good as it smells. And somebody else, either Reva Corder or Dave McCall, had the idea of the perking coffee pot. And 3 of us got together on that commercial, which just proves that there are no rules. Committees can create. Here's one of our other early commercials for Pepperidge Farm Bread, their first television commercial. There's something in this commercial which I like particularly. You see the old baker driving up the lane with a pair of white horses. It was an idea I had in my sleep. I dreamed it. And I woke up. I had the good fortune to wake up at 2 o'clock in the morning and wrote it down. And that went into the commercial.
Howdy, ma'am. Can't stop now. Got to deliver Maggie Rutkin's new Pepperidge Farm frozen pastries. Ever hear the like? Frozen puff pastry. Say you want old-fashioned home-baked apple turnovers. You just open up a package of them new puff pastry turnovers from Pepperidge Farm, pop 'em in your oven, still frozen, mind you, and watch 'em rise. When they get flaky and sort of golden brown, they're done. Maggie's making puff pastry in apple, blueberry, raspberry, and lemon turnovers. But puff pastry ain't all she's making. There's apple strudel, the likes of which you've never set your teeth into. Love that apple strudel. And a horse by that name once. Say, pick up a batch of Pepperidge Farm frozen pastries at the store, huh? They taste mighty good, 'cause you bake 'em yourself.
Now we're looking at the nationwide insurance commercial, the burning house.
Yeah, John, it's awfully hard for me to pick 1 or 2 commercials from all the hundreds, thousands we've made. But this nationwide commercial, I personally like very much. I find it very moving. It's real, it's true, it actually happened. It's the actual house, it's the actual owner of the house. Watch it.
Ruined. Completely ruined. The fire absolutely gutted our house. Nobody was hurt, and we saved some of the furniture. But everything else is gone. And because of what inflation has done to rebuilding costs, even our insurance isn't enough. We had a fire in the fireplace, and it caught an adjoining wall. That was it. I had just had a baby. This was her nursery. Upstairs, gone. Completely destroyed. Insurance gave us every penny they said they would, but it's not enough. Thanks to inflation, we were 40% underinsured.
Because of this, Nationwide Insurance has a homeowner's plan that keeps pace with inflation, monthly, whether building costs go up or down. It's based on U.S. Department of Commerce cost indexes, and it helps make sure that if your house burns down, you get it back. Homeowners insurance with inflation protection, part of Nationwide's blanket protection for your family or your business.
We're trying to sell it as is. The land's good.
In your experience, where do creative people come from?
It's a very good question, because success in the advertising business depends more than anything else on your ability to pick good creative people, fertile, talented creative people. How do you identify them? Well, I don't know. I recently asked 12 of our best creative people around the world what they look for when they're hiring young creative men and women. And they sent me long memos about it. And there's some threads which run through all of them. They look for people with a sense of humor. That seems to be important. They look for people who show curiosity about a lot of subjects. They look for people who will stick to their guns, who aren't pushovers. They look for people who have original minds. They look for hard-working people. I always look for people interested in advertising and who've read about advertising. They're articulate on the subject. They don't do it because it's the only thing they can do. But there are many other things we look for. It's a long list. And it's still very difficult.
Do you think creative skill can be taught?
Up to a point, yes. You can teach people their trade. You can teach people what factors make for success, where to look for good ideas, what things to avoid because they don't work. You can't teach your native talent, I think. But yes, by and large, you can teach it. And teaching is very important. Most teaching, when I first came into the business, most teaching agencies today is what's called on-the-job training. You're supposed to learn as you go along from your boss. If your boss doesn't know anything, how the hell can he teach you anything? Is generally the case. And advertising is being taught, certainly in our outfit today, in a more formal way. We've organized our corpus of knowledge into a series of audio-visual presentations we call Magic Lantern shows. And I find that a very useful teaching aid.
Well, yes, you've gone probably farther in codifying your ideas about the creation of advertising, making it effective than almost anyone else. Do you find this is acceptable to writers and art directors?
Well, John, first of all, I must say they aren't my ideas. We spent a king's ransom on researching the reaction of consumers to advertising. And from that we distill factors. And what we're telling people is not my ideas. We're telling how the consumer reacts to different stimuli. What is the second part of your question?
Is it acceptable to writers and art directors?
Well, it's acceptable to some and it's anathema to others. And if it's anathema to the ones they don't like, it's good luck to them. They can go and work somewhere else. But I think most good creative people have a burning curiosity. And if we can tell them what works and what doesn't work, they're happy to know and find out. Some do resent it, some resist it. I don't quite understand why. It's something deep within them. It's unconscious. Recently, I was talking to a copywriter who told me he'd never read a single book about advertising. He would prefer to rely on his own instinct. And I said, look here, supposing you've got an acute appendicitis. You have to be operated on tonight. Would you like to have a surgeon who's read some books of anatomy and knows how to do that operation, or would you prefer a surgeon who refused to read all books about anatomy and relied on his own instincts? Why should a manufacturer bet his money, perhaps the future of his company, on your instinct? And I found always that the best creative people are the ones who study it the most and are most interested in our codification of principles, which of course changes all the time, but not as much as you'd think.
Let me ask you, in picking creative people, does academic background matter?
Claude Hopkins, who's had a great influence on me, has been in his grave for about 40 years. Claude Hopkins believed that anybody with a college education should be disqualified from creating advertising because he was a fancy Dan from college, automatically couldn't talk to the American mass market. Because since then, the American mass market's become much better educated itself, and you talk down to them at your peril. Education, I don't know. I like people with well-furnished minds. I don't care whether they got it in college or whether they got it selling newspapers or delivering milk. Education, I haven't got a college degree myself.
I suppose it could be said that all Ogilvy advertising relies strongly on rationality, that is, detailed reason why advertising.
I say this, if you're going to advertise a product, imagine that you're at a dinner party, and the woman next to you says, I have to buy a new car. Have you any advice to offer me? Which car should I buy? And I tell her that I think she should buy a Mercedes-Benz, which happens to be the one we advertise. And she says, why a Mercedes-Benz? Well, I don't sing to her in rhyming couplets or try and put a mirage of hidden persuasion over. I give her rational reasons why she should buy a Mercedes-Benz. I don't insult her intelligence. And when you advertise, you're talking to one consumer, one woman, or one man. And put in your ad what you would say to that person if they said, which brand should I buy? I started life as a door-to-door salesman in Scotland for kitchen stoves. I had to ring the bell, the housewife came to the door. I had to talk to her about my product and why she should buy it. It had a profound influence on me. And most brand selection is not done at the unconscious level, it's on the conscious level. Consumers know exactly why they're buying this product. Of course, there are some products for which you can't do reason-wide advertising. It would be difficult to do reason-wide advertising for chewing gum and beer. Although beer, Todd Hopkins got a beer account, you know, and he wrote a 9-page solid copy at Schlitz about the period. But there are some things which you can't do reason-wide. It's hard to do it for cigarettes, it's hard to do it for beer. There are some situations where it's better to use emotion or humor or whatever it may be. But an awful lot of advertising can and should be reason why, serious, grown-up stuff. You know, the more you tell, generally, the more you sell. That's been demonstrated in research for department stores.
David, didn't you once say, if you had nothing to say, sing it?
Yeah, well, I hear all these singing song things on the TV. I can't hear what they're saying. The words are inaudible to me. I say to our people, if you insist on singing your advertising message, okay, record it and then play it to a few people. And when you ask them what did it say, and if they can't tell you what the music says, what the words say in the jingle, try again. It's got to be intelligible. But look here, John, supposing you're a housewife, and I ring the bell of your door, and you come to the door, and I start singing at you. You'd think a lunatic was outside. Supposing you went into a store and want to buy a frying pan. You go up and say to the salesman, may I have a frying pan? He starts singing at you. What do you think? We've got some research on that. Generally speaking, in advertising, commercials with voice-over sound under the words don't do so well. I'm wrong about that. I know I'm wrong. It's perhaps because I'm so old. Almost all our commercials have music in them today. We've got a wonderful music director, and good luck to them. They're doing it better.
What about the balance between creative and account executives?
The balance between creative and account executives. Well, it isn't a balance. It's out of balance. In most agencies, including our own, and most offices around the world, the account executives outnumber the copywriters by a ratio of 2 to 1. If you were a dairy farmer, you kept cows, would you employ twice as many milkers as you have cows? In the agency business today, as far as I remember, only about 1 in 10 of the employees is in the creative department. I just don't think that's right. Incidentally, John, I don't believe in this specialization. Who said that there's one breed of cat which is an account executive, and then there are the creative people? They're quite different. This has been perpetuated by both sides for years. It's nonsense. I think we're going to get into a period of generalization, of generalists, where you'll have people who are both account executives and copywriters, or whatever it may be. I'm seeing that begin. It's going to be forced on us. It's going to make life more interesting if for people in the business, if they're working both in the account side and in the creative side.
And what about clients? After operating an agency for 25 years, how do you feel about clients?
Some of my best friends are clients. We can't get on without clients. And the great thing is to have the right clients. There are plenty of agencies and plenty of clients. And we need to try and match them up so that the relationship is a good one. Happy marriages fructify and unhappy marriages don't. And it's a terrible thing if a client gets the wrong agency, wrong for them, or if the agency gets the wrong client. The relationship should be a happy one, a congenial one, a productive one, a suitable one, an appropriate one.
Do you think there are differences in the perception of advertising between top management of clients and, say, brand managers or product managers?
Yes, indeed. Of course, it depends on where the top management of clients come from. If the head of a big corporation has been their house lawyer, he won't have much of an idea of advertising when he gets to be chairman of the board. If, on the other hand, like some of the heads of companies I know, they started as brand managers or advertising managers, it's another matter. Generally speaking, I find that the top people in companies take a broader view of their advertising. And I think it's often a more intelligent view, and they're more prepared to delegate to the agency the creative job. I ran into an awful problem as I got older in the agency business. I became impatient with young brand managers, and I found it very difficult to put up with what I thought was often rather inane performance on their part. And I always tried to give clients advice. I wanted to say to the clients, here's what I would do if I owned your business, if I was heading your company. And a lot of agencies, don't like the client taking any part in the advertising. They want to keep them outside. A lot of creative people are awfully resentful of any intrusion by a client into the creation of the advertising campaign. I think that's very heartless. After all, it's the client's money, and it's the client's product, and it's the good name of the client. Shouldn't he be allowed to say in it? It's inhuman. Here's an ad. If you don't like it, you're dumb. You don't change a word. It's him you're advertising. And it's his product. It's his money. It's his company. I think that I've had some very good relationships with clients where we were doing cooperative jobs. The head of the Hathaway shirt company for many years, Ellerton Jette, he used to send me deluge with ideas for Hathaway ads. I'd get, say, 10 a month. And I'd throw most of them away. They were lousy. But every 10th I'd use. He said to me one day, do you mind my sending you ideas for ads? I said, so long as you won't tell anyone where I get my ideas, I love it.
There's been a tendency to think that more and more marketing expertise has tended to move to the client from the agency. Is this your experience?
Yes, it is. Because it started out like that. Years and years ago, all the marketing, the word didn't exist in those days, was done in the client organizations. The agencies just did ads. And then Rubicon started. He called it his merchandising department. We would call it marketing. He started. Same thing. And for the last few years, the clients have been taking it back. And of course, we're all recruiting from the same pool. In the agency business today, we go to the Harvard Business School, Northwestern, Wharton, wherever it may be, and recruit. And our clients go to the same place and recruit the same people. And the client brand managers, product managers, and the agency account people are interchangeable. And more and more of it is, I don't know if this is going on, if it's getting more, but it certainly is truer today than it was 25 years ago. The clients are doing more of it, and the agencies less of it.
Is it a good thing?
I don't know whether it's a good thing or a bad thing. I think it's better not to duplicate the function. We're pretty sure who is responsible for what. I'm sorry to say that a lot of advertising managers around the world, and I think it's increasing, rather small-minded people who are looking at the whole advertising thing through the wrong end of the telescope. They're looking like that to see how small, their chief conception is, preoccupation, how small amount of money can I pay our agency. It's very stupid, it's very short-sighted. Turn the telescope around and say, how big a result can I get out of the agency? My friend John Crichton says he's seen one advertisement sell 19 times as much for a product as another ad for the same product. The difference is the order of magnitude of 19 to 1. And that's what the advertising managers should be worrying about, and not how cheese-pairing can I be with our agency. This is a very serious disease. And the advertising managers who play that wrong end of the telescope thing, how little can I pay the agency, they do their companies irreparable damage. It's time somebody pulled the whistle on them.
You didn't originate the fee system of compensation, but you clearly preempted the protagonist position. How do you feel about it now?
I tell you why I preempted the protagonist position. When we got the Shell account, we were asked if we would handle it on a fee. We were told we had to handle it on a fee. So I agreed to it against the advice of some of my elders and betters in the advertising agency world. And I thought, this is going to leak out. You can't keep this a secret. And when it leaks out, people are going to say Ogilvy and Mather got that account because they cut the price, which wasn't true. So we came out with it. We made a clean breast of it and told the advertising world at large we were doing our fee. Actually, our fee was bigger than the commission. Our client said to us, I want to pay by fee, not by commission. I want to, when you come to me and say spend more on advertising, I don't want to suspect your motive. And he said, I don't care what the fee is. It's immaterial. Charge what you think you need. So that's what we do. What's the second half of your question?
Do you still feel like a protagonist for the fee, David?
Oh, I'm bored to tears with the subject, John. Well, we got that fee thing going more or less, and then more and more of our clients went on a fee. And I got so sick of it, because whenever I go and see a client, all they want to talk about was our system of compensation. It's so arid. I didn't want to talk about that at all. I want to talk about advertising. If you go and see your lawyer, and all you discuss with your lawyer or your doctor is the fee of how you're going to pay it. So I got fed up with it. I don't care how people pay, as long as they pay us enough, as long as we can make a decent profit out of it.
Let me ask the question again. Do you hire people from outside?
Well, you know, when you hire people from outside, it's very important how you did it, how you do it. We had a board meeting some time ago, and when we sat down, every director had at his place one of these Chinese dolls. And I said, open it. I said, that's you, open it. So they opened it, and the doll got smaller and smaller, and they opened it up, and each one got smaller and smaller. And finally, they got to the very inside, this little tiny doll in here, and in it they found a little motto, which I had written, and I'll read out and tell you what it says. I unfolded it. It said, if you always hire people who are smaller than you are, we shall become a company of dwarfs. If, on the other hand, you always hire people who are always bigger than you are, we shall become a company of giants. So let's go up from there rather than down and put the dwarfs. Hiring from outside, I think I practiced what I preached. I hired Jock Elliott, who was much bigger than me, and Andrew Kershaw, S.D. Stoll before them. Try and hire people who are bigger than you are. You've got to be fairly secure psychologically to run that risk, but it's worth doing. But most people, when they hire outside, they get smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller. It doesn't take long before they get kind of dwarfs running around.
May we talk about media for a moment? Do you think advertising on television is a good idea? What do you think of television in the United States?
I don't know if you're talking about programming or commercials or what. Advertising on television, of course, is certainly a terrific advertising medium for a great many products, but perhaps for most products. Nothing like it for moving merchandise. Whether it's good for the body politic in general to have advertising on television is another question altogether. Someone said the other day, the sound of selling is the dirge of our times. And if you got the box on for 4 or 5 hours a day, which is what most people have, they're simply deluged with commercials, and I don't particularly care for it. The interruption of wonderful programs with commercials, I don't much care for it. In Europe, it's much better controlled. In France, for example, the commercials don't interrupt the programs. They become between the programs. Same thing in Germany. European countries don't have the clutter that there is in American television. There's some products you can't advertise on television, of course, like booze and cigarettes.
Yes. Well, what about the advertising business? Is it a better business?
In print, in the United States, it's worse, I believe. The magazine advertising today that I see in the United States is not as good as it was 25 years ago. It's a dying art. The big agencies today, most of them only about less than 20% of their billing is in print. Most of it in TV. The TV's been getting better and better, and the print's getting worse and worse. This is getting to be a very serious problem. I was talking to a big international advertiser the other day, a huge worldwide company, and they said, we've got products which we want to put in magazines for various reasons, one of them being that the budgets aren't really big enough for television. We can't find agencies which do good print advertising. It's a dying art. They don't know anything about it. And you know, there's more research has been done on food advertising than any other category. It's been going on for 40 years. And they say we've talked to these agencies all over the world, and they don't know any of that research. They don't know how to do it. But television has got better. Of course it's got better. And print has got worse. I'm awfully interested in print, I suppose because I started there. And I'm trying to bring about a sort of renaissance of print advertising, where I can. Radio advertising. Radio is the Cinderella medium, I would say. I suppose in New York, I don't know what the percentage is, but it's one of the smaller media. But today, more and more advertisers are finding they just can't afford to be in television. So where do they go? Well, radio is one of the places they can go. And when it comes to radio advertising, there's a very serious shortage of research. I know quite a lot about how to make good TV commercials and how to make good print ads. I don't know much about how to make good radio commercials because I can't lay my hands on the research. We've done a little experimental research, tried to find out what factors make for good radio commercials. It's under-researched. And I think it would pay the radio the radio media, to get together and sponsor some good research, to teach us people in the ad business how to use it more effectively. For some countries, in some countries, 30% of our billing is in radio. I think it is in South Africa, for example.
If it had not been advertising, what else would you have chosen to work in?
Well, I would have had to try and find something else I could do. I would like to be an archaeologist. I wouldn't have been good at it. I would like to be a history professor. I flunked that. It's what I started out with. God knows what I would do. I'll tell you an interesting thing. I don't know if you know what your IQ is, but I found out what mine is recently. I bought a book on the IQ. And at the back there were several tests, and I administered them. I did the first one. Well, I knew I wasn't going to be 170. It was a genius. I thought maybe 140, 145, which is what a good lawyer might have. And I did this first test, and I looked up, and I said, oh, my God, there's some mistake. And I did 6 of them. I got the same result every time, 96, which is par for ditch diggers. Thank God I didn't know that when I was a kid, because I'd have gone out and been a ditch digger. For a few days after I made this awful discovery, I was miserable. But then I thought, no, I've gone through life carrying this awful handicap of being so dumb, and I've managed to do very well in spite of it. Hooray for me. I don't know what the hell I would do. I don't suppose I'll ever have a chance to find out in this other second incarnation.
You're often credited with having invented the concept of brand images. Is this correct?
No, it isn't correct. I know I'm credited for that. What happened was there was an article in the Harvard Business Review on the whole concept of brand images, and I read it. I had to make a speech to Foy's meeting shortly after, and I didn't know what to talk about. And very few people have read this article in the Harvard Business Review, so I took it and made a popular speech out of it, reached a much larger audience. And that sort of put the brand image concept on the map. It was their thought, their idea, their research, their scholarship, and my evangelism to put it on the map. And of course, some other things, there's a lot of trouble because a friend of mine, when I said, my God, he was son of a bitch. Our clients keep on calling us up now and saying, what's our brand image? What are we to say? But I'm very keen on the whole idea of brand image, and it's not considered enough by advertisers as much as it ought to be. Generally speaking, the brand with the most favorable image is the one which gets the biggest share of market in the long run.
Speaking of brand image, is it difficult to research?
It's not only difficult, it's impossible, really. I mean, it's impossible to... Most commercials today are being tested for recall. One commercial is tested once for recall. I don't know any advertiser, any client who believes in this system. I don't know any agency which believes in it. I don't know any creative person who believes in it, and they all go on doing it. I don't know why. It's very demoralizing. But if you accept the idea that the image of the product is a long-term, serious, determining factor in its success in the marketplace, you've got to put advertising out which will create or burnish that image over a period of many years. There's no research technique known to man which will predict that. You've got to use judgment. And judgment is an unfashionable word today in the advertising business. They all want to use research. As someone said, it wasn't me, I think, they use research as a drunkard uses a lamppost for support and not for illumination. But this is a very important thing. You cannot use research to predict which of, say, 6 campaigns or 2 campaigns will in the long run do the most for the brand. And you've got to use judgment. And there again, I think it's not a job for kids that. I think that the more mature, more experienced advertising people, like the heads of public companies and the old geezers in the agency business like me, probably have a better judgment for long-term effects of an advertising campaign than the beginners.
You are also credited with inventing the concept of positioning. Is that correct?
No, it isn't. I never invented the concept of positioning. It's a big buzzword today. Wherever I go, all our offices, everybody talks about positioning from one to another. They none of them mean the same thing. They don't. I wrote to the heads of all our offices the other day and said, please send me a telex defining what you mean by the word positioning in 15 words or less. We've got a fairly wide range of definitions. Positioning, I've no doubt, is very important. I'll tell you a curious thing. You can have correct, optimum position and still come out with an advertising campaign which has no effect at all, or even a negative effect. And you can have very remarkable advertising, which may not be right in terms of positioning, but can still sell an awful lot of the product. I've had about 10 great ideas in my life, advertising ideas, which isn't many, it's more than most people have had, but I've had about 10. And I'd never heard of position before the time I did that. But it's sort of the great thing today. It's all the rage. It's all the fashion, position. And I know it's important, but oh my God, it's been overdone. It's been overused. And a lot of positioning things, but the positioning is finally decided after months of philosophical discussion and debate. Often the positioning statement becomes the advertisement or the commercial. It's dead. There's no idea. There's no life in it. I didn't invent positioning. I'm always preaching in favor of it, but I didn't invent it.
Have you any advice to offer young creative people on how to create good advertising?
Advice? I talk for hours on this subject. First thing I say is be more ambitious. Don't bunt. When you get a job to do a storyboard or an ad, try and hit the ball out of the park every time. Don't bunt. Compete with the immortals. If you're going to do an automobile campaign, try and make it the greatest automobile campaign that any agency's ever done at any period. You won't always succeed. Reach for the stars, as Leo said. Sometimes. Be more ambitious, that's the first thing. The next thing is know your product. Study your product. Really work on knowing about the product. The more you know about the product, the more likely you are to sell it. Study the precedents. What other agencies have done, what campaigns they've done for similar products, and know all about that. Work like a son of a bitch. Work hard. Try and use your unconscious. Most great ideas come from the unconscious. And it's pretty hard if you're sitting in an office to have your unconscious throw ideas up to you through the telephone lines. I never wrote an ad in my life in the office. I always did it at home. At night, generally, after dinner, maybe I'd have a good bottle of wine, which helps you get in touch with the unconscious. Or shaving, then you get in touch with the unconscious. But ambition is the key. Try and do remarkable work. Try and be great. And don't present anything unless you've got a great idea. I say to people when they want to show me some campaign, before I look, I say, have you got a great idea? And if they say no, I say, well, I won't look at it. Go away and try and get a great idea. Try and get great ideas. Great ideas that nobody's ever had before for the last few years. Ambition. It's the lack of ambition which cripples most people and makes them so pedestrian in the advertising creative business.